What's up guys, today I'd love to share with you my story how I went from 1600 to 2260 in less than 1 year, and I'm talking about FIDE rating. For this purpose I'm taking my game when I was 11 years old. I wasn't a grandmaster yet obviously, and my strength was about 1600. I'm playing white against Page Christopher from Australia playing black, and we are entering the French defense. So my purpose with this game is to show you the difference. So I'll show you how I thought back then and how this thinking process should be improved in order to get to an advanced level. So I'll show you exactly how I did this so that hopefully you can replicate these ideas and get to the next level faster. Alright, anyway, let's move on. So black plays the French defense, go knight c3, the two knights variation of the French defense. Black goes bishop b4, and that was the end of my opening knowledge right on the third move. So from then on, I'm playing on my own. Now, how would you play here if you were playing white? Let's think about that together so that we can walk through the usual thinking process and we'll see how to improve that, all right? So first of all, I'll share with you how I thought back then. Now, I saw that black is putting pressure on this knight, and if they trade it off, they can then grab my pawn on e4, and I was concerned about that. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this pawn? Like, one of the obvious ideas is just to trade it off on d5. So that is the solution, but what I disliked is that it opens up this diagonal for the bishop, which was previously locked by his own pawn on e6, and so I kind of didn't like it that much. So I thought, okay, if not then what can I do? I could possibly defend this pawn by going d3, but it looks a little bit passive now. My own bishop is locked, and also maybe he can go d4 and make use of this pin. Therefore, I didn't like it either. And so I've been thinking and thinking. By the way, it was an over-the-board, long time control game, so I had time to think, and I came up with the move queen e2, which was kind of quite sophisticated in my view back then. I thought that it potentially threatens pawn takes d5, making use of this pin, and simultaneously I'm defending this pawn. So that's how I thought back then. Now let's compare it to a more advanced level of thinking. So first of all, let's start from the very beginning. Like, lower rated players, they think about individual moves. They're lacking kind of grand scheme understanding of what's the overall plan in a position. And when you're playing an opening stage, you gotta always keep in mind like the big picture, that your task is to fulfill the three main opening tasks, which are to develop pieces, castle, and connect the rooks. And that's what you should always keep in mind and try to fulfill. In light of that, the queen e2 move I don't like at all. Like, it blocks the bishop, it's kind of awkward, and it does not help in these three tasks. It rather prevents them from being executed. So queen e2 I don't like at all. All right, so how should you think in an opening? And of course, I'm not talking about this particular position exactly. That'll apply to any other opening position just as well. So again, first off, we gotta accomplish the three main opening tasks and primarily to develop pieces. That's why if we are worried that this pawn is hanging, indeed it's easiest just to trade it off and not overcomplicate matters. Yes, it opens up the bishop, but it's not the end of the world. We can just continue d4, bishop d3, castle, just playing simple moves, not overcomplicated matters. So that was a decent move to play. And here is an even more advanced idea if you really want to play at a high level. Now, the more advanced idea is not to be reactive. Now, at the lower rated levels, people are very reactive, meaning your opponent is attacking you and you start immediately thinking about defense. Now, high rated players, they first evaluate the threat itself. So is this threat even dangerous at all? Should you worry about that at all? Like Stockfish, apparently to humiliate me, showed me when I analyzed the game that even playing h4, a completely meaningless random move, was better than what I played queen e2. Like, it hurts. But anyway. And the point is, bishop to c3 is not a threat, actually, because if black executes it, this helps us to open up this bishop, and if black wants to grab this pawn, then there is another drawback. White can now trade queens here, forcing black's king to move, and after that, knight to g5 will double attack these two pawns, therefore white would get back one of them with a good position. So therefore, black had no threats at all, and white actually had nothing to worry about. Moreover, after we found out that bishop takes c3 is actually not a threat followed by pawn takes pawn, we could even provoke black, say, hey, you want to execute it? Go ahead, dude. And we can just play a3 and even invite black to execute his threat, because it turned out that it's bad only for black. And so that's the highest level of thinking. So a3 was the best move. Anyway, I'm playing queen e2. Black in response took here on c3, and here's another question to think about. Should you capture by this pawn or this pawn? Now, of course, it's not winning or losing the game, but nevertheless, it makes your position better or worse. So which move to pick? So first, I'll tell you how I felt back then. I heard the rule that it's advisable in such positions to take towards the center because it strengthens your center, and therefore I took with this pawn, thinking that it solidifies my center. Now, going back to the starting position, again, the problem of a lot of players, as far as I see, is not even that they don't know any chess rules at all, but rather that they heard a bunch of rules and they're not sure about priorities. So knowing those priorities makes things a lot easier and you play stronger. And in opening, if you focus on development, you don't overload yourself with a bunch of different ideas. And therefore, if we think about development, we need to think about this bishop, and pawn takes c3 was a lot better. This would open up the bishop, activate it, and white's position would be really good after that. Instead, I took with the b pawn, which was wrong. By the way, just to clear the doubts, when I say how I went from 1600 to 2260 in less than a year, some people might think that I'm just some sort of chess genius and I'm extremely talented. And I wish it'd be the case, but it's not. You see that in this game, I'm just like, I'm not hanging pieces in one move, but basically every move that I play is wrong to a different degree of rawness. And is there such a word in English, rawness? It would be weird if I say rawness wrongly, so I hope that it exists. Anyway, so I wasn't some sort of another Magnus Carlsen. I wasn't particularly talented because by this time, I've already studied chess for several years. I went to a local club. I've had a coach who trained a group of kids, myself included. So I wasn't new to chess. I studied it for several years, but I'm still playing like pretty bad moves all the time. Anyway, pawn takes e4, queen takes. So I'll tell you the real secret to my progress in a moment. Knight f6, he's attacking my queen. I dropped it back, queen h4. I mean, Stockfish says queen a4 was better, but I mean, it's a subtle thing. I don't think it matters that much. Black played b6. All right, so here's another position where white has a choice of which move to play. Now, in the game, so first let me tell you how I thought back then. I realized that he wants to play bishop b7, and from here the bishop would attack my knight, possibly ready to destroy my pawn structure. And in order to prevent that, I played bishop e2. Just wanting to develop a bishop and also to defend this knight against his bishop attacking it this way. While it may sound that it makes sense, it actually violates the principle of maximum activity, which says that you gotta move pieces to most forward available squares. Because one of the essential ideas about chess is the idea of activity. You want to make your pieces active. You want them to control more squares. You want them to attack your opponent. And as you make more pieces active, you start dominating and you win. So bishop e2 is what nowadays I call a half move. It's like you wanted to make a move, but instead of doing it the right way, putting it to the most forward available square, you stopped it halfway through. Right? So that's what nowadays I teach students, but back then I did all these mistakes myself. So bishop b5 should be the first move to think about if you want to develop a bishop, putting it to the most forward available square once again. Now from here it attacks the king, and even though black can cover by going c6, that would also block his diagonal. So if now we drop the bishop back somewhere, it doesn't matter. If black ever wants to move the bishop here, it would be blocked by the pawn, and like this pawn takes away a square from the knight, for example. So that would anyway be nice for white. Instead, I played this passive move bishop e2, which is like, it's not losing the game, but it's just passive, and that's bad. Now let's move on. Black played bishop to b7. I castled. That's okay. Knight to d7. d4 I played. Maybe not the best move, but okay. Knight e4. Now here black starts creating some threats. He's putting pressure to this pawn, and I'm offered to exchange queens. All right, so how would you play in this case? Before we move on to the game, let me also show you one kind of funny thing. I decided to Google this question to see what people think about this. So how long does it take for a 1500 to 1600 ELO rated player to reach a 2000 rating plus on average? And here's the top answer. It says, typically they never do. Not a very optimistic answer. Unfortunately, it's true, but I'll tell you in a moment how to speed up this progress tremendously. In the actual game, I noticed that this knight is attacking my pawn. I wanted to get rid of this, and I came up with the move bishop g5. So I thought, okay, cool, I'm counter-attacking him, and if he wants to get rid of this, he'll have to trade off his knight, and I'm getting rid of this threat, so I thought that is a smart thing to do. Now, it wasn't. The reason is, a bishop is stronger than a knight. That's what a lot of beginner level players don't know, because classical chess books or tutorials tell you that both a knight and a bishop are worth about 3 pawns, and therefore these are equal pieces. Now, that is a simplification for beginners. In reality, bishop is a little bit stronger, although they're approximately equal, but in the vast majority of the positions, a bishop is a little bit stronger, and therefore you should not normally trade your bishop for your opponent's knight. So what was the right thing to do? Well, again, not to overcomplicate matters. So he's kind of putting pressure here, so white should have just traded queens, and after that, White should have thought how to defend this pawn, whether to move it forward or to play bishop b2. Again, simple thing, just not overcomplicating. It's interesting that playing stronger chess sometimes is actually simpler, because you know the right ideas and you just rely on them. You don't think about a ton of possible options that you have in a position. Anyway, I played bishop g5 thinking that I'm cool. It wasn't the case, so black decided to trade it off. Now he goes pawn h6, attacking my knight. Now I have to move it back, knight f3. And eventually we traded off queens anyway, just my knight is now out of play, black castled, and now that's not a position to think about. So how would you play here if you're playing white? I played bishop f3. I saw that this bishop is active, decided to trade it off. So that was my thinking process. Now, what's the right way of thinking? Well, the right way of thinking is that, again, first of all, we should stop this one-mover thinking. When you just think about the next move and you look at your pieces and you think, okay, where do I move them? Like, that's how lower rated players think. Initially, again, we need to know the big picture. So in an opening, our main tasks were to develop pieces, castle, and connect the rooks so that they kind of defend each other this way, and there is nothing else standing in between them. Now the opening has finished. Actually, we rushed to an endgame because queens were traded off quickly. And what do we do in an endgame? We need to know an endgame plan. And an endgame plan revolves around pawns. After queens come off the board, you have not enough horsepower to attack your opponent's king, so to say. And therefore, it starts being all about pawns. You either attack your opponent's pawns or you promote your past pawns and get a new queen, and then you checkmate your opponent. And if it's all about pawns, we can see that white is actually feeling here pretty badly, because white has these doubled pawns, this isolated pawn, and black's pawn structure is very nice. So white's actually in trouble, because black can, down the road, start attacking all these weaknesses, and white has nothing to do, really. So one of the ways to try to solve this problem for white was to push this pawn forward, so that it puts some pressure on black, and at least you can trade off one of your weaknesses, so that would be something worthwhile to think about. Now, honestly, I haven't thought about that at all back in the day. I just didn't know all these things at all. Now, instead I played bishop f3. I mean, it's not too bad, but what I don't like about it, again, is the lack of planning, that I'm always playing one-movers, right? Just I'm thinking what to do right now, in the moment. So black traded it off and played knight to f6. Here I realized that perhaps he wants to go here and attack my weak pawn once again, so I played c4, black played c5. Now this time, undermining my center, I played c3. Not the best move, but decent. Black played rook c8. He's now starting to take aim at my weaknesses, so I defended it with rook to c1, so that I can, defend this pawn. Black played rook c7, and to my surprise, black actually offered a draw. Even though I played chess for about 6 years, my level was very average. However, the very next year, my rating became 20-60, and a year later, I became an international master. Let's look at my game of that period. Now, I'm playing with white, I'm still playing pawn e4. Black responds with pawn to c5, knight f3, knight c6, the Sicilian defense, pawn d6, pawn c4, grab in the center, knight c3, a6. So far, it's more or less standard. I think somewhere about this time, my opening knowledge has finished. So from now, I'm playing on my own, just developing pieces, castles, bishop g7, bishop e3, castles, and rook to c1. Now, in this case, my moves are a lot more meaningful. And what was the reason? Well, about that time I found a really good chess coach who got my mind to the right track. And he told me all these things, that in opening you develop pieces, castle, connect rooks, and you don't think about anything else. So that's what I'm just doing. And another rule of thumb is that in an opening, ideally you want to move every piece you have. That just makes sure that you don't forget about something and you don't leave one of your pieces unused completely. And that's what I'm trying to do. Bishop d7, knight b3. I'm not sure if it was that necessary. Anyway, b6, f3, queen d2, rook d1. You see, I'm trying to move every piece that I have, and by now I achieved that goal, right? Every piece, exactly every one of them, which I had in the game, every one of them has moved from its original square, making sure that all of them are taking part into the game. Now black plays queen b8. Now here comes the next phase, middle game. So after you activated all of your pieces, what do you do next? The answer is you move to your opponent's half of the board and you start putting pressure, you start creating threats. So I'm asking myself, how can I move to opponent's half of the board? There aren't that many options, so I jump with my knight to d5. That doesn't attack anything right now because black is covered, but anyway, I'm just moving forward. Black played rook c8. Now, what do I do here? Once again, I ask myself the very same question. How do I move to my opponent's half of the board? Again, there aren't many options. In fact, there was only one move which I could see, which was bishop to g5, which I played. I mean, white could trade off knights, but that would be just an exchange. So bishop g5 seems to be making more sense. I'm putting some pressure over here. Black played bishop e6. Now I'm thinking to myself again, okay, I can trade off here, and I already know that bishop is stronger than a knight, so I do not want that much to trade off my bishop. I could take with a knight, but then if he recaptures and attacks my bishop, I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe it's good for white, but on the other hand, I'm trading off my active knight. I'm not getting anything substantial, so I'm not sure if that's the move to play. Then I keep thinking, okay, is there any other move on my opponent's half of the board that I can play? And I found the move pawn to c5, which sacrifices the pawn, but on the other hand, opens up this diagonal for the bishop. And if I could, I'm going to take this pawn, and from there, I'm going to take one of his rooks. So black was concerned with that, and he decided to cover by going b5. By the way, you see that I found this tactic c5, not because I'm a great tactical player, but because I asked myself the right question. How do I move to my opponent's half of the board? And I've been asking myself this question throughout this entire middle game phase. Now, I took here on d6, and it turns out that black's actually losing the game already, because he cannot recapture over here. That will leave this knight undefended. Now I'm attacking it twice, he is defending it once, so I will just grab a knight. And if I get it back, the same thing if he captures with a queen. If I take over here, the problem for black is that, he's going to lose something over here. He captures by the pawn, he'll hand a queen. He captures by the bishop, I can trade queens first, and then grab a bishop. So pretty simple, right? Just following a couple simple ideas. In the actual game, let me get it back. In the actual game, black realized that he can't recapture. He decided to instead take here. But now after recapture, everything is hanging here. White is a pawn up. Knight c5 is coming, possibly going after this rook. And white is getting a completely winning game, even though I still played far from perfect from there. And it took me a very long time to convert this advantage into an actual win. But nevertheless, overall, you can see that my game became a lot more smoother and a lot more meaningful without playing wrong moves all the time. And it happened in a very short time frame. So, what is the secret to chess success? Now, you see that the game we analyzed at first, the first game that I played, there I was just a regular guy, and I've been studying chess just like most other people. I've been, doing some tactical puzzles, playing some blitz games, then, reading some books or watching some videos, and I heard that these guys said do this, and I did it, and then the other coach or GM said do this, and I did that. So I did these random things. And so I had a bunch of ideas in my head, but I wasn't really sure what's like the right thing, and every position still left me confused about so what am I going to do here, right? And my game was very inconsistent with a lot of wrong moves. Now, from that on, what has changed is I got a coach, and he just got my mind on the right track, and he told me all these things that I'm sharing with you right now. Just do an opening, move every piece you have, activate them. In the middle game, look at the opponent's half of the board, ask yourself, how do you move there, and put some pressure, create threats. And I said, okay, gotcha. And I went on and I did what I was told to do, and things got a lot better than they were. All in all, chess progress can be a lot faster and a lot more smooth if you just know what to do. If you know that, okay, I gotta do this and I got to this level, then I gotta learn this and I got to the next level. And then you really go forward steadily, slowly but surely, and you get this desired progress. Now, I hope that you got a lot of useful ideas from this video itself, but of course it's a shorter YouTube video, so if you want to go more in depth, I got a course, Level Up Your Chess, where I give you all these ideas, like how to stop blundering, which is already plus 300 rating points immediately, and then what to do in opening, what to do in the middle game, what to do in ending game. It's a complete comprehensive course that gives you this guide towards chess progress. So if you're interested, you can click the link below the video and check it out right there. I'm sure you will enjoy it. It's my newest course, and I'm frankly quite proud of it. And I hope that you will benefit a lot from this. Also, let me know what's your story of chess progress. I'm curious to know. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll talk to you soon.